Ethan had been working as an HVAC repairman for over 6 years. He was the kind of person who didn't expect anything unusual to happen during his daily routine, especially not in a high-tech, futuristic city like this. When his boss sent him on a service call to a high-rise apartment in the heart of the city, he didn't think much of it. It was just another broken air conditioner. He arrived at the building, a sleek tower with shiny glass windows and a futuristic design. The lobby was quiet, the kind of place where only the wealthy or powerful people lived. Ethan wasn't used to this world of luxury. He worked with ordinary families in the suburbs, not the elite of the city. As he waited for the elevator, he glanced around at the modern, minimalist decor. Everything was clean, polished, and efficient. The elevator doors opened, and he stepped inside. The ride up was smooth, the hum of the elevator almost soothing. As he reached the top floors, he noticed the city sprawling out below him. The lights of the metropolis glittered like stars in the distance, and the air felt different, cooler and more artificial, a result of the city's advanced climate control systems. Ethan shook his head. He wasn't here to think about the city's grandeur. He had a job to do. When the elevator finally stopped, he walked down a narrow, elegant hallway to the apartment at the end. The doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a spacious, dimly lit room. The place was incredibly cold. Colder than he expected. It felt like a freezer inside, despite the warm lights and modern furniture. In the center of the living room, a woman stood, her back to him. "Hello?" Ethan called out, stepping inside. The woman turned, and he froze for a moment. She was tall, with long, dark hair that framed her sharp, regal face. Her eyes were a piercing blue, as cold as the room she stood in. She wore a silver dress that shimmered with an almost ethereal glow, and there was an aura of power around her. She looked nothing like the ordinary people he usually dealt with. Ethan couldn't help but feel a bit out of place. "You're here for the AC?" she asked, her voice as cool as the temperature around them. "Yeah, the name's Ethan," he said, extending a hand. "I'm here to take a look at your air conditioner. Looks like it's on the fritz." She glanced at his hand briefly, her expression unreadable, but then she nodded and gestured to the far corner of the room. Ethan could feel the chill in the air intensify as he moved toward the broken unit. "Everything's on the display over there," she said, her gaze following him with a strange intensity. Ethan wasn't sure what it was about her, but something about her presence felt different. He didn't think much of it, though. She was just another customer, after all. He approached the air conditioning unit, pulling out his tools and getting to work. As he worked, he couldn't help but notice the silence between them. There was no small talk, no attempt to make him feel comfortable. The room was eerily still, the only sound the faint whir of the air conditioner as he tinkered with it. "You must get a lot of work done on this thing," Ethan said, trying to break the silence. She didn't respond at first. Ethan looked over his shoulder to see her standing still, staring at him with those cold eyes. It was like she was observing him, studying him in a way that made him feel uneasy. But then she spoke, her voice almost like a whisper. "I don't often need repairs," she said, "but sometimes even the best systems break down." "Yeah, I hear that," Ethan said, focusing on the wires. "Just gotta get this working again, and you'll be all set." For a moment, he felt the air grow colder around him, like the temperature had dropped a few degrees. It was strange, considering he hadn't touched the settings yet. He glanced at the woman again, but she wasn't moving, her gaze still fixed on him. As he fiddled with the AC unit, Ethan felt a sudden shock run through his fingers as they brushed against the wiring. He pulled back quickly, cursing under his breath, but when he looked at his hand, it was nothing more than a small spark. He shook it off and continued working. But then something happened that he didn't expect. As he tightened one of the wires, the unit hummed loudly. The lights flickered for a brief second, and then the room grew even colder. So cold that Ethan could see his breath in the air. He turned to the woman, his heart racing. Was this some kind of prank? The woman stepped forward, her expression suddenly changing. Her eyes glowed with an intense blue light, and the temperature in the room plummeted further. Ethan could feel it now, a strange pressure in the air, as though something had shifted. It was no longer just the AC acting up. "Something's wrong," Ethan said, stepping back from the unit, but the woman didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and placed her hand on the control panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a flick of her fingers, the air seemed to freeze in place, the room no longer just cold but impossibly frigid. Ethan shivered, his breath visible in the air. He didn't know what to do, but something told him this wasn't just a simple malfunction. The woman's eyes never left him, and she spoke again, this time with an eerie calmness in her voice. "You should leave," she said, "before things get complicated." Ethan didn't understand. Was this some kind of test? Or maybe she was just trying to scare him. But as he started to back away toward the door, something unexpected happened. His hand brushed against hers. The moment their skin made contact, a sudden, overwhelming surge of energy pulsed through him. It wasn't like anything he had ever felt before, like a jolt of electricity, but deeper, more primal. Ethan's heart raced, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow down. He stared at the woman, whose expression was now one of shock and confusion. Her eyes widened as she looked at him, as though she, too, had felt something shift. The cold around them intensified, but it wasn't just the air now. It was something else, something between them. And then, just as quickly as it had come, the feeling faded. Ethan pulled his hand back, confused and disoriented. The temperature in the room returned to normal, but the moment lingered in the air. The woman, Selena, didn't speak for a long time, her gaze fixed on him, studying him as if trying to understand what had just happened. "I don't know what you are," she whispered, almost to herself. Ethan, still trying to process the strange encounter, took a step back. His mind was racing, his body still tingling from the unusual connection. "I'm just a repairman," he said, his voice shaky. "I don't know what just happened." Selena looked at him for a long time, her icy expression softening just the slightest bit. "No," she said finally, "you're not just a repairman, and you have no idea what you've just done." Ethan didn't know what to make of it, but he knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary AC repair job. Ethan stood there frozen, his hand still tingling from the brief contact with Selena's. The room had returned to normal, but his heart was racing, and his mind couldn't make sense of what had just happened. Selena didn't speak for a long moment, her gaze fixed on him, as if she were contemplating something far deeper than what was apparent. Ethan wanted to speak, to ask what the hell had just occurred, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he took another step back, his mind trying to grasp any kind of logical explanation for the strange sensation he had felt. The temperature in the room was back to what it should have been, but there was a new weight in the air. The silence stretched between them, and Ethan shifted uncomfortably. He was used to talking his way through awkward situations, but this one was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Selena's voice broke the silence, quiet and almost detached. "You don't understand, do you?" she asked, her tone colder than before. But there was an edge of something else there, something almost like disbelief. "You've touched something ancient, something that no one should have the power to awaken." Ethan's brow furrowed. "I'm just a guy trying to fix a broken air conditioner," he said, his voice strained. "I don't know what you're talking about." Selena's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, the world seemed to still again. It was as though she was trying to decide whether or not to tell him the truth, to bring him into a reality that had been hidden for centuries. Finally, she spoke again, her voice softening just the slightest bit. "You're more than you think," she said, almost like a whisper. "You've been marked, connected to something far greater than you could possibly understand." Ethan blinked,
trying to make sense of her words.
Marked? What do you mean? Selena didn't immediately answer.
She turned her back to him, walking over to a large, icy window that looked out over the city. The lights from below shimmered like stars, but the chill in the room had returned. Ethan could feel it again, creeping into his skin, making him shiver. It was as if the room itself had become a reflection of her inner world, cold, distant, and untouchable. Finally, Selena spoke again, her voice quieter this time. I wasn't supposed to let anyone in. Not like this. But you're different. Ethan couldn't make sense of what she was saying. Look, I don't know what you want from me, he said, his frustration rising. I came here to fix the AC, nothing more. Selena turned to face him, her expression unreadable. It wasn't the AC that needed fixing, she said, her gaze piercing him. It was you. You're the one who triggered it. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but his words faltered as something strange washed over him again. It was like a rush of energy, like he could feel her power pressing against him. But it wasn't just that. There was something else, something more personal. His heart raced, and for a moment he thought he might collapse. He steadied himself against the wall, trying to calm the rising panic within him. What's happening to me? He asked, his voice strained. Selena's eyes softened for a brief moment, as though she understood his confusion. She approached him slowly, and for a second, it almost felt like she was walking through the cold air itself, her every movement graceful and controlled. She reached out, her hand hovering near his, but she didn't touch him this time. Instead, her eyes met his, and in them, Ethan saw something he hadn't noticed before, a deep sadness, as if she had been carrying the weight of an untold story for far too long. You're not the only one who's confused, she said quietly. But I should have known this would happen sooner or later. The prophecy was always there, waiting. Prophecy? Ethan repeated, still struggling to catch up. What are you talking about? Selena nodded, as if she had been expecting this response. She gestured toward the room where the temperature had remained strangely cool. I'm not just a woman.
I'm the heir to a long line of people who control the weather. I am the Ice Queen, the ruler of a faction of people who have the ability to control temperatures, change climates, and manipulate the very forces of nature itself.
And you? She paused, her voice almost breaking. You are the one who has been chosen to be with me, whether you understand it or not. Ethan stood frozen in disbelief, trying to process her words. He was still just a repairman, wasn't he? This couldn't be real. There was no way he was involved in some kind of ancient prophecy. No way he could have just been chosen to be part of something so incredible. It didn't make sense. Why me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Selena's expression hardened again, and she stepped back, as though she were trying to create distance between them. I don't know. But the bond we've created, the touch we shared, it was not an accident. It was a calling, a connection that was meant to happen. Ethan's mind was racing, but it was hard to focus. What am I supposed to do with this connection? He asked, his voice growing more urgent. I don't want to be part of some prophecy. I'm just trying to get by, trying to make a living fixing things.
Selena turned away from him again, her hands clasped behind her back. You don't have a choice, she said, her voice tinged with sadness.
You've been marked. Whether you want it or not, you are now tied to me, to my people, to my world. A chill ran through Ethan's body as he tried to comprehend what she was saying. How could something like this be real? He was just a guy, fixing things for a living. He had no part in any prophecy, no part in a world of power and control. Yet here he was, standing in the presence of someone who claimed to be a ruler, someone who had the power to change the world with a single thought. He was terrified, but at the same time, He couldn't shake the strange connection he felt toward her. It was like a part of him had already known, deep down, that there was something more to this encounter, something beyond the broken air conditioner and the cold room. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "So, what happens now?" he asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "What do you expect from me?" Selina looked at him then, her icy eyes softening ever so slightly. "I don't know," she admitted. "I didn't expect you to be the one, but now that you are, we will figure it out together." For the first time since entering the apartment, Ethan felt the weight of the situation press down on him. This wasn't just about fixing an air conditioner anymore. His life had changed in ways he couldn't yet understand, and whatever was happening, it was only just beginning. As he looked into Selina's eyes, he realized that there was no going back. He wasn't just a repairman anymore. He was something else. Something that had been chosen, whether he wanted it or not. And that something was tied to the Ice Queen, a woman whose power and responsibility were beyond anything he could have ever imagined. Ethan sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, still processing everything that had happened. The words Selina had spoken kept echoing in his mind. He was marked, chosen, tied to her and her world in ways he couldn't yet understand. How was this possible? Just hours ago, he had been fixing air conditioners for regular families. Now he was entangled in something far beyond his comprehension. The room was quiet, too quiet. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive, as though it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine, but it wasn't the cold of the room this time. It was a cold he could feel deep within himself. The connection to Selina, the bond that had been formed with that single touch was real, and it was growing stronger by the minute. Selina stood by the window again, her gaze fixed on the city outside. The coldness had returned, and the air shimmered with the power that seemed to radiate from her. Ethan watched her, trying to understand her, trying to find some way to make sense of all this. He wanted to ask more questions, but something held him back. She had been so distant, so guarded. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met before. But there was also something in her eyes, a vulnerability he hadn't expected. She might be powerful, but she wasn't invincible. He could see it in the way her shoulders were tense, the way she carried herself, as if she was constantly aware of the weight of her position. Ethan stood up, walking slowly toward her. He didn't know what he was going to say, but he needed answers, needed to understand what was happening to him, what had happened to them both. "Selina!" he said softly, his voice steady despite the confusion swirling in his chest. "I don't know what to do with all this. I don't know what this bond means. But I can't just sit here and do nothing." She didn't turn to look at him at first. For a long moment she remained still, her eyes scanning the city below as though she were searching for something beyond the glass. Ethan felt a deep ache in his chest as he watched her. She had her own struggles, her own burdens. She wasn't just the Ice Queen. She was a person, a woman, who had been isolated by her power and her responsibilities. Finally, Selina spoke, her voice low and almost distant. "You want to help?" "You can't. Not yet." "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Ethan frowned.
I don't need to understand everything right now. I just need to know what this means for me.
"For us? Why me?" Selina's gaze shifted to him then, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his breath catch. "Because you were chosen," she said, her voice filled with an emotion Ethan couldn't quite place. "The prophecy spoke of someone ordinary, someone human, someone who would complete the bond. A bond that could either save or destroy us all." Ethan took a step forward, his mind reeling. "A prophecy?" He shook his head.
"This sounds like something out of a fantasy novel. I'm just a guy who fixes air conditioners."
"I don't belong in any prophecy."
You don't understand.
Selena said again, her voice sharper now.
The power I have isn't just for show. It's a legacy, a curse, and a responsibility, all in one. And when you touched me, it awakened something deep inside you, something ancient. Ethan looked at her, his mind struggling to process her words. But I don't feel any different, he said, more to himself than to her. I'm still the same guy. Selena's eyes softened, and she stepped toward him. It's not always something you feel, at least not at first, but the bond is growing, and so is the power inside you. The question is, can you control it? Can you stand by me and help me save this world from those who would see it destroyed? Ethan swallowed hard. He wasn't sure he could do any of that. He wasn't a hero. He didn't have any special powers. But the way Selena looked at him, the way she seemed to place so much trust in him, made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he could be something more. I'm not saying I'm the right person for this, Ethan said, his voice quiet but firm, but I'll try. I can't just turn my back on you. On this, not when I don't even know what I'm up against. Selena studied him for a long moment, as though trying to gauge whether he truly understood what he was getting into. Finally, she nodded, her expression still guarded, but less distant than before. Good, she said softly, because we have no choice. We're already in this together. The room seemed to shift then, as though something had changed between them. The air grew warmer, and the coldness that had settled around them began to dissipate, though Ethan couldn't help but notice the slight chill that still clung to the air. It wasn't just the temperature. It was the weight of the situation. He had stepped into a world he didn't belong to, and now there was no going back. Selena turned away from him, walking toward a large door on the far side of the room. There's much you still don't know.
Much you need to understand if you're going to help me. But I can't teach you everything all at once.
She paused and glanced back at him. Come with me.
I'll show you the truth. Ethan hesitated for a moment before nodding. He didn't know what Selena had planned, but he knew that he couldn't leave now. He had already become a part of her world, and whatever happened next, he had to face it. With her, together. He followed Selena as she opened the door and led him down a narrow hallway that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls were adorned with strange symbols, ancient carvings that seemed to pulse with a faint light. They walked in silence, and the deeper they went into the building, the colder it became. Ethan couldn't help but shiver, despite the warmth of the building around them. They finally reached a large chamber at the end of the hall. The room was vast, filled with glowing crystals that seemed to hum with power. The air in here was thick, heavy with the energy that seemed to permeate the space. Selena stepped inside, and Ethan followed, feeling both awe and fear creep into his chest. This is where it all began, Selena said, her voice echoing in the vastness of the chamber. This is where my ancestors discovered the power to control the weather, the power to shape the world around them. And this is where you'll learn what you need to know. Ethan looked around the room, his mind spinning. This wasn't just some random building in the middle of a futuristic city. This place felt ancient, like it had existed for centuries, untouched by time. Selena turned to him, her eyes shining with something that wasn't just power, but hope.
You may not understand now, but in time, you will.
Together, we can stop the forces that are trying to destroy everything we've worked for. Ethan nodded slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since meeting Selena, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself, something worth fighting for. Ethan felt the weight of the room pressing in on him, the energy around him thick and almost alive. The glowing crystals that lined the walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, casting eerie shadows across the floor. Selena stood in front of him, her eyes focused on a set of ancient symbols carved into the stone that made up the far wall of the chamber. The air was cold here, colder than it had been in the rest of the building, and it was as if the temperature itself was charged with anticipation. "Do you feel it?" Selena's voice broke the silence, her words soft, yet carrying a weight of meaning. Ethan didn't need to answer her. He could feel it, a strange sensation running through his body, as if something deep inside him was stirring. The cold, the power, it was all part of the same force that connected him to her. But what did that truly mean? What was this power, and why had it chosen him? Selena turned to face him, her expression serious. "This is where it all began," she said, her gaze drifting back to the symbols. "These walls tell the story of my people, of the power we wield, and the burden we carry."
"This place holds the key to everything." Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine.
He wasn't sure he wanted to know everything. It was all so much to take in. His life had turned upside down in the span of a single day, and now he was standing in a place that felt both ancient and alive. His thoughts were a whirlwind, but one thing was certain. Whatever had happened between him and Selena, it was only the beginning. "These symbols," Selena continued, stepping closer to the wall, "are more than just markings. They're a map, a guide to the power that runs through my bloodline. The power to control the elements, to shape the world around us." She turned to look at him, her gaze intense.
"And now that power is yours as well." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "Mine?" he repeated, unable to process her words.
"But I'm not like you. I don't have any power. I'm just a regular guy." "You think you're just a regular guy, but you're not," Selena said, her voice firm. "You are bound to me now, to my bloodline. And with that comes a power you haven't even begun to understand." Ethan shook his head, trying to make sense of everything. "But why me? Why did it have to be me?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. Selena's expression softened slightly, though her eyes still held the weight of years of responsibility. "It's always been the same," she said quietly. "The prophecy spoke of someone from outside our world, someone who wasn't part of the power struggles, who could see us for who we truly are."
And when we joined, when you touched me, it awakened something in you.
It's not just about the power. It's about the bond we share.
"You're the one who can help me, Ethan." Ethan felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. He wanted to reject it, to deny it all. But deep down, he knew he couldn't. Something had changed between them the moment their hands had touched. He had felt it, the surge of energy, the connection, the bond. It was real.
"I don't know what to do with this," Ethan said, his voice barely a whisper.
"I'm not a hero. I can't control whatever this is."
"I'm just a guy who fixes things." Selena's gaze softened, and she took a step closer to him.
"You don't have to be a hero, Ethan. You just have to stand by me. That's all."
Ethan looked at her, her words sinking in.
He had never imagined being a part of something like this. He had never asked for power, never wanted to be caught up in a prophecy. But standing here with Selena, feeling the energy between them, he realized that there was no turning back. Whatever was coming, whatever challenges they would face, he had already made the choice to be part of it. Whether he liked it or not, "Okay," Ethan said, his voice steady, though his heart was racing.
I'll do it. I'll stand by you.
"But you have to tell me what we're up against. What's really happening?" Selena nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of relief and determination. "I'll explain everything. But first, we need to understand the danger. There are forces out there, people who want to use our power for their own gain. They'll stop at nothing to control the weather, to manipulate the elements. They've been waiting for this moment, the moment the bond between us was formed." Ethan's stomach churned.
People want to control the weather?
He asked incredulously. "That sounds insane." "It's not just about weather," Selena said, her voice growing colder. "It's about control, the ability to change the course of history. If they succeed, They'll reshape the world, and not in a way that benefits anyone except themselves.
Ethan felt a chill spread through him, though it wasn't from the temperature.
This was real. The stakes were higher than anything he had ever imagined. He wasn't just a repairman anymore. He was part of something far bigger than himself, and that something was at risk.
What do we do?
Ethan asked, looking at her, determination starting to build in his chest. Selina's expression hardened, and for the first time since he had met her, she seemed to fully embrace the weight of her role.
We fight.
We stand together, and we stop them, but it won't be easy. They know about the bond, and they'll be coming for us. They'll try to tear us apart before we can stop them. Ethan nodded, his resolve strengthening. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. "How do we start?" Ethan asked, his voice steady, despite the uncertainty that lingered in the air. Selina took a deep breath, her gaze never leaving his. "We need to go to the heart of their operation. They have a base where they're gathering power, trying to harness it for their own purposes. If we can get there first, we can destroy their source of power before they can use it." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know how he was going to do any of this, but he had made his choice. He had already stepped into this world, and now he had to see it through. Selina walked toward the door of the chamber, her movements graceful and confident. Ethan followed her, the weight of what was to come pressing down on him. He wasn't just walking into danger, he was walking into the unknown. As they stepped out of the chamber, Selina paused, turning to face him. "I know this is a lot to take in," she said, her voice softer now.
But we're stronger together, and we have no other choice but to fight.
"For both our worlds." Ethan nodded, his determination clear in his eyes. "I'm with you." Together they stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next. They didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. They would face it together,